Hello and welcome to my tithe farming guide. I'm going to show you how to do it efficiently using the 25 seed runs, which is 6 lanes and then 1 extra seed. So you can do it in 4 quick runs without your crops getting diseased. It turns out it's a little bit faster to do this than to use 20 seeds and to replant as you're harvesting. So I'll kind of go into that. Basically the trickiest part about this method is the movement, making sure you move efficiently. So I'll show you how to do all of that in as much detail as I can show you. In order to start tithe farming, you need 100% Hosidius favor. It's one of the less painful favors to gain, so don't worry about that too much. You need watering cans, and I recommend bringing 10, a seed dibber, and a spade. That's all you need to do tithe farming, but it's very useful to have Graceful outfit because you're running around a lot, as well as stamina potions for the same reason. If you are only going to do one complete run at a time, you probably don't need the stamina potions. You only really need to drink from those if you're doing it for extended periods of time. You can unlock the farmer's outfit as you go, which will increase your experience from that, but you really only wear it when you're depositing the fruit into the bag. The rest of the time you'll be wearing the Graceful set. And then you need to make sure you leave at least 2 inventory spots open for the seeds and the fruit. If you have the humidify spell and the Lunar Spellbook, I would definitely recommend that. If you bring that, you'll also need infinite water and fire runes, which you can get from something like a steam battle staff. And then you also have to bring your astral runes. And then this is the way I like to set up my inventory, to just keep the watering cans close to the game window, so it's easy to click on them and then to the plants in the game window. And I keep the stamina potions down here and the farmer set on the right side all in a row so you can quickly equip it and unequip it when needed. So in order to get to the tithe farm, if you've been here before, you can use the minigame teleport to the tithe farm. If you haven't been here before, you'll have to run here, and you can use the Xeric's talisman to teleport to the glade and run north, or you can take the boat from Port Sarum and then run along this path south to the tithe farm, which is located right here on the east side of Zaya. When you get to the tithe farm minigame and get inside this building, you'll see this seed table. You can click on it and select the highest level of seed that you can grow. At 74 farming, you'll be able to get the most experience per hour, so that's the one I'm going to use. And then you go over here and click on the farm door. If this is your first time, he'll ask you if you want to do a tutorial, and since you're watching this video, you won't need to do the tutorial. Then you run over here to this patch, and we will be using this patch as well as these 6 rows up here. If you look at the map, this is about what our route's going to look like, starting at 1 and going up to 25. This image I got from the wiki, and there's a brief section on this method there, but like I said, this is really about how you can do the movement efficiently, so I'll really talk about that in depth. Before I go into the route and show you which ones to plant and in what order, I'm going to show you some movement tricks. So first off, I have rune light set to show which tile I click on, so it's easier to see where I'm going. You want to start on this tile. So basically how it works is there are 4 spots along each of these rows, and each one has 3 tiles in front of it that you can plant from. So I could plant from this tile, this middle tile, or this tile on the right for this first plant. So on the very edge here, if I tried to plant this seed or tried to water from here, I can't plant from there. So there are only the 3 spots in front of it. So for that reason, you want to start exactly on the spot where I'm standing so that you'll be closer to these other 2 patches over here. I want to talk about how walking and running works in old school RuneScape. You notice I have toggle run turned on, but when you click one tile in front of your character, they still walk and it doesn't consume any run energy. This is because running is something that happens 2 tiles at a time. So the amount of time it takes to walk 1 tile is the same amount of time it takes to run 2 tiles. So basically if you're running, you're halving the amount of time it takes to travel somewhere. These rules also apply to diagonal squares, so if I click 1 diagonal square, it's a walk, 2, it's a run, and it also applies to mixtures. So this is actually 2 squares away because it goes forward 1 and the diagonal 1, and that's why you still get a run animation out of that particular movement. And then if you do it like that, to where it was 3 squares, you walk the last one. So we'll be using that a little bit, but for the most part, we'll be using running ahead a couple of squares and then walking a diagonal square. But you want to make sure that you're running as much as possible. But basically that's the movement and the kind of explanations that you need to do this method. So the next thing I want to talk about is animation canceling. When you plant a seed, there's a long animation with the seed dibber, and then when you use the watering can, there's also a long animation. And these can both be just about halved if you cancel them. So when you plant the seed, as soon as you see the seed appear in the ground, you want to water it. So you plant the seed, and then as soon as it appears, you want to have the watering can selected and then click on the seed like that. So plant seed, you'll notice that like it canceled right in the middle of the seed dibber animation. So the watering can animation, you also want to click away as soon as you see water coming out of the can, or maybe even right before it. And it's a little bit more forgiving than the seed dibber one, because you can actually just spam click as soon as you see the watering can, and you'll be able to cancel it in time. Right there, I used the watering can too soon, and so it didn't actually water it, and that's something you really want to avoid. So you want to wait, something like 0.3 seconds or something small after the seed appears before using the watering can to make sure it goes through. And then as soon as you see the watering can, you can spam click, and when you get comfortable with the timing of the watering can, you can just single click like that. So that's basically the animation canceling for the seeds and the watering cans. So before we get started with the actual route, you can just drop this fertilizer that you get when entering, so you have this free space for your harvested fruits at the end. The fertilizer halves the amount of time it takes to grow the seeds, but you can't manage as many when you have them growing twice as fast, and ends up not being as efficient. So just go ahead and drop that. The next thing I want to talk about is making sure you're running for most of the time. So after you plant the first seed and water it, you want to make sure you're running the entire time on your way to the next seed, which is this square. You want to plant on that square. If you accidentally go to the square after it, you'll notice you get a walk animation. We really don't want that. There's another situation where you click on this square, but you plant it too late. So you notice there was a brief pause before a character turned to plant it. Because if it's efficient, then there won't be a brief pause. They'll begin turning immediately as they stop. So there are a couple ways to do this. One is just to click on the square and then plant as you're going onto these last two squares. You always want to plant the seed as you're beginning your last movement tick. So right here, the run starts right here and ends right here, the last movement run. So you want to begin planting your seed as you move over this square, as you run past this corner. And that's how you always make sure you're efficient. So see kind of like how when I started that run, I started planting the seed then. So that's one of the tips I have for that. And there are two ways you can do it. Like I said, you can click on the exact square you're moving to, or you can actually just click past and then just make sure you begin planting as you move past that last running tick, because you want to plant on this square. So now that we've moved across the aisle and planted this first seed, we need to move across the lane to plant the next one. And as I said earlier, there are 3 tiles in front of each spot, and we are on the first possible tile that we could have planted this one. So to keep with our theme of running as much as possible, we'll want to move forward 2 squares. So forward 1 and then diagonal over here like this. That way we're running as much as possible. And as soon as we begin our movement, that's when we want to initiate planting the next seed. That way we make sure there's no downtime between it. So I'm going to click here, begin planting, exactly like that. So our character never paused. They immediately began planting as soon as they got here. And then normally we would cancel the seed dibber animation and go into the watering can. So the next one we want to plant is on the same side of the aisle. We don't want to zigzag every time. Since we're already on this side, we want to go ahead and stay here. So we want to move forward 2 squares to make sure we're running, and plant as soon as we begin movement like that. Now, this is where we start using single diagonals, because you'll notice we're in the middle square of the 3 possible squares we could have used to plant this one. So if we move forward 2 squares, That's actually too far, and if we tried to plant here, we have to move backwards. So from where we were, we just want to move diagonal forward 1. And this is how it'll be for the rest of the aisle. So it'll be like this: diagonal forward 1, 2 forward, diagonal forward 1, and then we're at the end. So basically on the first one, we ran 2 tiles forward 2 times. And then, because we had to plant this one across the aisle and then move on to the next one. But then the rest of them, when we go across the aisle, we only do 1 diagonal. So then this kind of whole thing repeats because we're doing these 6 patches. So we want to go across the aisle again. So we click in this spot, and then we plant the seed, and then we continue doing what we were doing. Okay, so when you've reached the end of this lane, you have to go across here to get to the next patches. So there are a couple ways, or a couple places you can click. You can click on the first possible plantable spot for this patch, or you can click on the last one. So the first one is a little bit easier to see because it's right above your character, so I'm going to click on that one, and then make sure you start planting as you pass that corner, and go ahead and water that. Then you'll notice that in order to get to the next spot, since we aren't zigging back and forth anymore because these spots should be filled with plants, you actually can't just move forward 2, you have to move forward 4 spaces. So go ahead and do that, and I clicked too early to plant there. So that's something you need to look out for. So you should end up on this spot, and then you can move forward 2 to plant the next one. And for this last one, you also have to move forward 4. So it's difficult to find the 4th square, so eventually you just kind of know which one to click on. But something that might make it easier is actually just to click on the last possible square that you can plant on, or maybe even past it, and just try to initiate the planting process as you pass the last tile for the previous patch. So I would click over here, and then as I pass this point right here, I would initiate planting this seed. So right there. And you'll notice I didn't ever walk. I was always running that whole time. So you can kind of do that the whole way with here. Just kind of clicking past where you want to go. Obviously you'd want to be watering these. But that seems to work for me. And then when you get to the end, this is the original one we started with. So you want to run all the way here, and you only want to click on this first possible square. Sometimes you'll get a walking animation at the end there, depending on how many squares, however you did this area. But that doesn't matter. We just don't want to go past here because we have to end up running backwards. So we just want to make sure we never go past this spot when we go back to the original. And then we would begin the watering process. The watering sequence has the exact same movement. The only difference is you don't have to plant. All you have to do is water. So when you run up here, you just water, move across, water, and you can cancel them the same way as you cancel the watering animations from the original planting. So there's really not much difference. The only thing is you're not planting. So it's pretty straightforward. And the harvesting mode is the same as well. You use the same movement. The only difference is you simply click on the fruit instead of using a watering can or anything like that. So usually what I like to do is on my way from the last square back to the beginning, I like to transition into the farmer's outfit and then click on that and begin moving. And instead of watering, you just click on the fruit and you use the exact same movement as before. Yeah, and you can do this long diagonal at any point during a lane. You don't have to do it at the beginning like I showed at the beginning. And that's pretty much that. So for the harvesting, the experience is so low that it might not even be worth it to change to the farmer's outfit. I just do it because I don't really care about how much stamina potions I'm drinking. So if you're worried about stamina potions or something like that, you can really just use Graceful during the harvesting phase. The only time you really want to wear the farmer's outfit for sure is when you are depositing the fruit into the sack. And you want to do this after you're completely done. But just to show you, this is the sack that's close to the door. So when you're completely done, you'll just click on the sack, you'll deposit it, you'll get the experience. And you only get points after you've used up all of the seeds you have. So you want to make sure you do a full run as much as possible. And then also, somewhere in the harvesting phase between the aisles, I like to cast humidify. So usually when I get to the end of the lane here and I switch over to this, that's where there's a lot of running, the most running in here. So usually during this part I cast humidify, and by the time you're over here you're usually able to harvest. It might be better to click the farthest patch just so you have a little bit of extra time to click humidify in case you're a little bit slow. And then if you don't have humidify, at the end of your harvesting you can just rock over here to this water barrel and fill up the rest of your watering cans and then run back over to the spot. So like I said, that doesn't actually waste very much time. And actually if you don't have humidify, you might consider switching to where this is your starting point, and then you use these 6, or actually probably better for this to be your starting point, or to have your 6 be these 6 if you use this as your starting point, just so that the water barrel is really close to where you start and begin. The only difference this would have is you're slightly farther away from the beginning, but since you have to use the water barrel 4 times, it's probably better if you don't have humidify to start from here. You've probably noticed going through here that I go kind of crazy with the camera. What I've found to be most helpful when going through the rows that you have to plant on both sides, is having the camera like fairly up and down, almost completely vertical, like pointing straight down at your character, and then zoomed in to where the edges of the screen are the farm patches. So when you're zoomed in this far, it makes them a larger target to click on, so it's easier to click them, whereas if you're zoomed out really far, it's kind of hard to be precise about it. So I kind of like to use this approach, and then when you get to the last one, I like to zoom out and kind of angle down a little bit so it's easy to see which tile to click on next. And I kind of like to angle it sideways. I don't know why, it just kind of seems helpful for me to click onto the next space, and then I zoom back in and get back to this position. So the way I'm moving it around so fast, if you don't know, you can hold down the wheel button on your mouse if your mouse has a wheel, and drag the mouse across the screen. Otherwise you can use the arrow keys, which is probably fine. And then if you're using mobile, this method might be too difficult for mobile unless you have a tablet, because you have to really click on specific tiles. I guess you could always use the method where you run past where you're trying to go. Anyway, and then when you get to the end of this row, I like to kind of keep it angled this way. But when you have your screen like this and the seeds down here are fully grown, sometimes when you're trying to click on these patches, they get in the way. So I kind of change the angle a little bit to about like this. And that seems to help for this final row. And then when I get to here, I zoom out again to go across the lane, zoom back in to make it a little bit easier. And then at this last point, I kind of zoom out and kind of click over here like this. But you could also use the map, the mini map, to go between the aisles and just kind of keep the camera fixed like this. But I just don't prefer that method. I found the way I'm handling the camera like this to be most useful. But yeah, just whatever works best for you. That's just my 2 cents on the camera. Here's some additional footage of me doing some tithe farm runs. Basically, if you know all these movement techniques, you can go as fast as possible and you'll never run into a bottleneck where you're waiting for the stuff to grow. So basically, the faster you go, the better your experience rates are. Whereas with the other methods, sometimes if I was doing them really well, I'd have to wait for stuff to grow. So that's really good about this one. You'll notice I like to play in fixed mode, but that's just because I use the zoom in feature from Runelite where you make the game window twice as big as normal, so the inventory is much larger and it's easier to click on the inventory things. If you don't use that feature, then it's probably better to use stretch mode. And sometimes I like to reposition the watering cans to the top left of the inventory space so they're closer to the game window, and I do that between the lanes. I find that a little bit helpful. And then you also would want to drink from the stamina potions between lanes, humidify between lanes, etc. You don't have to do them in the same spot though, it really doesn't matter too much. If there are any additional updates to this method, like something ends up being faster than what's here, I'll try to update the description. But as far as I'm aware, this is the fastest way to get experience in tithe farming. And it's good to know all these movement things, but they're not entirely necessary. There's a lot of leeway. You'll notice in this footage I do make a lot of mistakes, so it's really not. It's pretty forgiving if you know all these movement methods. But if you don't use them, then it can be really difficult. So that's kind of the reason behind being as specific as I was, showing exactly the best way to do it. So as long as you try to do it the best way, even if you make a lot of mistakes, there's a decent amount of leeway. So that's about all I have to say. If you need to see some additional footage because you still have some questions on parts of it, I'll try to put a link in the description to some additional footage. This video is already way too long, so I can't put it on the end here. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, like and subscribe, yada yada, blah 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 blah. Thanks, bye.